Hi, everybody. I've kind of got that homeschool school pride vibe today. You know, it's gray outside, it's raining, and it's quiet here. And only my son Greg is awake at the moment. So, kind of a down day for a depressing topic. Today we're going to talk about the rest of the Vietnam War, or much of it, and there's not a lot of joy in it. I mean, the conduct of the Vietnam War for the United States sees some terrible things happen on all sides, and our perspective of the Vietnam War, as you know, can be crafted in a variety of ways. You can say, well, there really was a Cold War, and communism was actually trying to take over the world, and so in fulfillment of the Truman Doctrine, we tried to oppose it anywhere we could. That is 100% true. And we also know that America misunderstood the Vietnam War by thinking that the Vietnamese were turning communist because they were all about spreading communism, which was not true. Although they did become communists, they did so to oppose Western mercantilism that was taking their stuff. And the French, of course, lost at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, and then Vietnam was divided between Russia and the United States because there was a Cold War on, and that set the stage for a proxy war. Vietnam did not have to happen. It was the context of communism that caused the Vietnam War to happen through the Cold War. So anyway, we're going to start on slide 16 of 47 today, if you're following along on Edmodo. I actually have a Google Classroom set up right now, and if I get I have to have administrative access, some G Suite administrator access before you can become part of it. But if I get that, then we can start working on Google Classroom like I had originally intended. So, on slide 16, the North Vietnamese moved supplies on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You can see on the map on slide 16 that the Ho Chi Minh Trail runs from North Vietnam through Laos and part of Cambodia into South Vietnam. It is a trail through which the North Vietnamese brought supplies into South Vietnam for the war effort. I want to point out that the American troops were not allowed to go into North Vietnam because the Russians had nuclear weapons and we had nuclear weapons. And if we had, just like going towards the Yalu River was a bad idea, going to the DMZ and North Vietnam was a bad idea here. I'm not saying that America has the capability to learn from our mistakes, but maybe we learned from that mistake. So let's move to slide 17, 18, and leads to slide 19. 17 and 18 introduces you to General William Westmoreland, who was in charge of the troops on the ground in Vietnam. And it is difficult to demonstrate that you're winning a war when there's no set-piece battles, where you don't line up and run towards each other, like at some of the battles in the War of 1812. This is my cat Mordecai. Mordecai, of the 4 cats we have, this is the one who loves me the most. Say hi, Mordecai. Good boy. Thanks for thanks. Westmoreland wanted a body count. Westmoreland wanted to be able to demonstrate that America was winning the war, and to show that you need some form of metric where you can say we did more of a thing than they did, and for Westmoreland that was body count. So search and destroy missions often killed a variety of people, and we didn't necessarily target civilians, but the civilians in South Vietnam were in a tough spot. They were told by the North Vietnamese guerrillas fighting in South Vietnam that if you don't hide weapons for us and help us, we'll kill you. And the American troops told the villagers, if you don't turn in those weapons and those North Vietnamese troops will kill you. And so the civilians were caught in the middle of this and were often victims. In fact, on slide 18, you're introduced to the massacre at My Lai. At My Lai, this very thing happened. The village was told by the North Vietnamese guerrillas to hide weapons and those weapons were hidden near the village. American troops got word of this, and one of the challenges they had is that they had been in a search and destroy mission for over a week. They'd been shot at, their friends had been killed in front of them. They'd watched people they knew very well die right in front of them, and they were not in an emotional state where they were combat effective in that they could make decisions that met the terms of the Geneva Convention. So when they found out that the villagers hid weapons, they realized these may have been the weapons that killed my friends. And so the American soldiers began to kill the civilians in the village of My Lai. Over 200 civilians were killed. During this event, a helicopter pilot named Hugh Thompson landed his helicopter, physically threw himself on some villagers, and put them in his helicopter and got them out of there. And the testimony of Hugh Thompson and those villagers led to the conviction of many U.S. servicemen who ended up being convicted of murder. It's an impossible situation for both sides. The North Vietnamese troops are fighting a guerrilla war in a jungle with a very low technology level. They lose pretty much every battle they fight, and so if you want to feel good in some way about being American, I can tell you that America won the fights. The Americans, however, are in a foreign jungle fighting for an objective they can't really quantify. It's not like we're ending fascism or we're defending our shores. Maybe in a metaphorical way that's true. Kit Bowen may have said it best. He was in the 1st Infantry Division in Vietnam, and when he was discharged and came home, he became an anti-war advocate, and he said, "We are the unwilling, working for the unqualified, to do the unnecessary for the ungrateful." I always have students struggle with this sentence. We are the unwilling, and that's the soldiers, working for the unqualified, and that's the leadership of America, the politicians and the military leadership who doesn't really have an exit strategy, a victory condition, or really a purpose. What are we there doing? And doing the unnecessary, and that's the fighting, for the ungrateful, and that's the South Vietnamese. So it's a situation in which without some sort of exit strategy or victory condition, there's no way this is going to succeed. And that's a lesson for us in Iraq and Afghanistan. It may feel good to start a war, but if you don't know how to end it when you start it, you probably shouldn't be doing it. And that's where we are right now. So I will admit that while we did not target civilians did continue to die through the use of a variety of tools. One of those was Agent Orange. Agent Orange is a chemical defoliant. It is a chemical that makes the leaves fall off the trees so that from the sky, the American airmen can see people on the ground. We can actually expose the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We can stop the flow of supplies into South Vietnam. The problem is the Agent Orange is highly carcinogenic. I'm not going to say that right. It's a carcinogen. And the exposure to Agent Orange leads to the death of a lot of U.S. servicemen who do not get the acknowledgement that the U.S. government did this to them until after they were dead. The Agent Orange claims, towards the Veterans Administration, were a source of contention for decades. And this is one instance where we did not take care of our service personnel. So you can tell I haven't had a haircut since you last saw me in person. And I've got the full, if you may not be familiar with a band called Flock of Seagulls. Maybe you look it up. That's where I'm headed right now, from the 80s. And oddly, it's the same haircut I had in the 80s. Number 2 on the list is saturation bombing of the North. Under Lyndon Johnson, we started a campaign called Rolling Thunder, where, get this, we dropped more bombs on North Vietnam on North and South Vietnam during the Vietnam War. I'll start again, because I want to say this right. We dropped more bombs on Vietnam during the Vietnam War than all of the bombs dropped by all sides during World War II. It may sound like a lot of bombs to you, especially considering 2 of them were nuclear weapons with a high tonnage of TNT associated with them. And yeah, that's how many bombs we dropped. So you may remember Anthony Bourdain. Before he took his own life, he had a show called Parts Unknown, where he would travel the world and sample food from around the world and talk to the people who cooked it. During his episode in Vietnam, he was with a family, and a cook had one leg. And he asked the guy, why, if you don't mind me asking, why do you have one leg? He said, I used to be a farmer, but my leg got blown off by an American bomb left over from the war. And Bourdain stopped the show, and the rest of the show was about how many million unexploded bombs littered the agricultural land, and how many people died daily in Vietnam as a leftover consequence of the war. There are like 3 teams that try to deal with these unexploded bombs, but 3 teams dealing with millions of unexploded bombs is a losing strategy. America still pays some money to Vietnam to help deal with this unexploded ordnance, but the saturation bombing of Vietnam was massive. And civilians continue to die to this day. Number 3, we put landmines around the country. And you may not know this, but America is the only nation on the planet that did not sign the Landmine Ban Treaty. We're the only nation that says we'll put landmines anywhere we want, and they'll kill whoever steps on them, and we don't care. So I'm not 100% sure I feel good about that, but you can make your own choices. Number 4, we mined harbors. Number 5, we use napalm. Napalm is a jellied gasoline. It sticks to what it hits. It's like petroleum jelly and gasoline put together. This is not a primer on how to make napalm. I don't advocate it. It will kill you. Napalm was used so that whatever it touches catches fire and you can't put it out. You have to deny it oxygen. And if you try to go underwater, it'll float, and now your water's on fire. It will set. It's like Greek fire. It will set water on fire. Napalm spreads in a large area, and it'll burn a whole village. Number 6 is fuel-air explosives. Fuel-air explosives are called the poor man's nuke. A fuel-air explosive will atomize a combustible material. It will throw it over a very large area, like all of A wing at EHS would be the volume of spread for this combustible aerosol. And so the first stage of the bomb throws the atomized material out in a large area, and the second stage ignites it. And when you ignite something the volume of the A-wing with a combustible material, it's a pretty big explosion. That's why it's called the poor man's nuke. In fact, if you saw Forrest Gump, Lieutenant Dan lost his legs to a fuel-air explosive. Anyway, these things are largely indiscriminate. They don't target very well, and a lot of civilians lost their lives in Vietnam due to the use of these weapons. In 1970, President Nixon announced that United States troops would be given 20 days to clear the Viet Cong guerrillas out of Cambodia. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but having U.S. troops enter a foreign nation state for military action is actually a declaration of war. And we're not at war with Cambodia, are we? Because Congress, according to our Constitution, has the right to declare war. But Nixon basically issued a declaration of war. You remember me talking about the War Powers Act? The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution led to the creation of the War Powers Act, which said that the President of the United States can authorize military action for up to 30 days without congressional approval. This item here, the entry into Cambodia, was in line with the War Powers Act. Now, as I said earlier, the War Powers Act has never been challenged in court. If it were, I believe it would be unconstitutional, because the Constitution is pretty clear that only Congress is authorized to declare war. So the American troops got within a mile of the Viet Cong supply base in Cambodia, and they didn't attack it. There's so many questions. In fact, why didn't they ever attack the supply base they found, which was their mission? That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that America's entry into Cambodia destabilized the Cambodian government. The government was asked by the people, why didn't you stop this? We were invaded by a foreign power and you did nothing. And so the government collapsed in Cambodia because of our action. Because the government in Cambodia collapsed, a guy named Pol Pot rose to power. He was a bad man. He used 1 million of the 3 million people in Cambodia to imprison the 2nd million and murder the 3rd million. Cambodia took a long time to recover from that. That's largely because we entered Cambodia in an unofficial declaration of war. Okay, we're going to look at some pictures on slides 24 and following that are very disturbing. If you at home would like to skip over them and advance the video, you are welcome to do so. I often give students the chance to leave the room when we look at these. Okay, first picture is an American soldier with some Vietnamese children around him. This picture doesn't end well. The photographer, after taking this picture, saw a woman tell a child to take this basket of apples to that American soldier. When the child with the basket of apples gets to the soldier, the hand grenade in the basket explodes, killing those children, the one carrying the basket, and that soldier. It's not an easy story to hear. One of the most famous images to come out of the war is this image known as Napalm Girl, and it was taken by Nick Ut of the Associated Press in 1972 at the village of Trang Bang after it was bombed by the Air Force with napalm. I know you can't really see it very well, but the girl actually doesn't have an epidermis. Her skin was burned off. Her clothes and skin were burned off by the napalm because it sticks to what it hits. And good news, she did survive. In the 90s, early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, Oprah Winfrey brought the pilot who dropped this bomb on her show. He had a lot of problems. He did not fly after this picture was printed. The pilot, had simply looked through a bomb sight and pushed a button. And after this was printed, he began to see the faces of the people he was dropping bombs on. And he didn't deal with it very well. So he was banked. He never flew again. And after the war, Oprah Winfrey brought this pilot onto her show to talk about this image. And she ambushed him and had this girl come onto the show. It could have ended very badly. She lives in Canada now. And they hugged it out. They cried a lot. I think that it was a terrible idea to do, but it had an adequate ending. Let's see. Let's move on to slide number 27, some images at Tan Binh, Vietnam in 1966. You can see on the left that an interrogated North Vietnamese guerrilla is being dragged behind an American armored personnel carrier. And, this is the kind of thing that happened to Hector at Troy. And none of us had a good feeling when we read about that. And I don't have a good feeling when I look at this image. It turns out that in some instances, we've become the very thing we want to stop. We do not want to become a nation that treats our enemies in this manner. Now we've become no better than, tyrannical, dictatorial, authoritarian communist powers. On the right is a Viet Cong guerrilla who's been interrogated and he's being taken out to be shot. The cover of Life, America was not immune to this. This is the first war where media saturation was complete. We saw it on television, we heard it on the radio, it was on the cover of magazines. This image on slide 28 was the cover of Life magazine on April 16, 1965. The photographer was killed a year later. The images that he took are in your textbook, if I were to have given you a textbook. And probably the most infamous image to come out of the war is on slide 29. This is General Luan executing a Viet Cong spy. He said he was a spy. And this is happening once the South Vietnamese realize that the Americans are leaving. The South Vietnamese begin to clean up the mess from the war and eliminate anyone who knows exactly what all sides did. Um, I can't promise you that anything good came out of this. An opposition to communism, perhaps, a proxy war that allowed America and Russia to take out their anger in a way that was not nuclear, perhaps. I mean, we could view it that way, good, but the pain and suffering caused by this war was simply immense. Tomorrow is Friday. There's no video on Friday. And so on Monday, we'll start on slide 31 and talk about the home front during the war. So it's rainy. I've talked about depressing topics. Perhaps you make a mug of hot chocolate and get under a blanket. That seems like a good idea today. I think I'll do that. Stay safe.